helpful to go through introductions again, just to let them know our committee members, as well as those who have joined us today. I'll go ahead and start. I am Mary Jo Wiggins. I am Finance Deputy Director here at Metro.
I'm Ashley Warrington. I'm in the mayor's office.
Alex Dickerson, Metro Legal. Here.
Wanda McDaniel.
Morgan Johnston.
Nancy Stabell, the Nashville Business Coalition.
Jane Allen, Nashville Entrepreneur Center.
Corinne Plummer, Nashville Entrepreneur Center.
Eric Ruffin, Nashville Business Innovation Center.
And just one announcement, if you do speak, please just hold your mic. Otherwise, our people that are listening online cannot hear.
All right. Again, thank you. Many of our guests came on very short notice, but one of the things that we are focused on today is really a discussion around our small businesses, and in light of really understanding what the conditions are, what is going on, and what are the things that we're hearing most from our small businesses, we invited some folks that we know are specifically in that area. The first thing we want to do, though, is start with our Revenue Commissioner for the state of Tennessee, David Giaragano. Thank you for being here. And if you could just give us kind of what you're seeing at an overall state perspective.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you today. I will mention from a collection standpoint, we certainly saw a hit in revenues, particularly for the month of, beginning in the second half of the month of March, as you would imagine, and certainly for the month of April. The good news is that those have rebounded significantly in the subsequent months. But we do still see a shift in terms of looking at sales tax collections, in particular, a shift in where folks are purchasing, away from stores, more online, and obviously the industries such as restaurants and hotels continue to be below where they were for obvious reasons. At the same time that overall collections are really back to where they were. So definitely a shift in purchasing at the current moment. Aside from collections, I think maybe folks are interested in hearing about the business relief program. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about that. In early June, Governor Lee announced the business relief program and asked the Department of Revenue to administer that. And we do that in conjunction with the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group, with members of the General Assembly and constitutional officers and others on that group. Excuse me. And that program is designed to use federal CARES Act funding to assist small businesses across the state. And the Department of Revenue was asked to administer that because we have pre-existing relationships with those businesses in the fact that they file tax returns with us. So we had a relationship and data about businesses that made it possible for us to create a program with the goal of quickly identifying the businesses that would qualify and pushing those funds out to them, and doing as much of that proactively ourselves, and requiring as little as possible of the businesses. And so it's not an application process, which is what some states have done. Instead, we established criteria working with the governor and the FSAG to identify businesses that had annual gross sales of $10 million or less, and who file either sales tax returns or business tax returns and fell into a certain industry category. So we were looking looking to identify and push these funds to businesses that have been directly impacted by the executive orders that required certain businesses to close, particularly during the month of April, or otherwise were directly impacted by those executive orders. So, and this information is all out on our website. If you go to the front page of our website and click on the Business Relief Program, you can find this information and more. But a lot of those industries are obvious. The close personal care services, such as barbers and hair and nail salons, those type restaurants. Those type businesses, restaurants, bars, hotels, gyms, venues where large numbers gather, whether that's an entertainment venue, a theater, a bowling alley, those types of businesses. Then, in addition, there's a separate category of businesses that qualify if they meet a certain reduction in their sales for the month of April. These are really sort of the retail stores. And, you know, across the state, there was maybe a less uniformity about which of these stores closed and which didn't, or how they reacted to the executive order. So in the retail sector, whether it's a furniture store, clothing, shoes, jewelry stores, bookstores, et cetera, they're included if their sales tax reported in the month of April was reduced by 25% or more. So it's what we shorthand refer to as the sort of the 25% test applied to those categories. And so we used our tax database to identify all these businesses. There were about a little over 33,000, and we contacted them, and either by email if we had an address, or by U.S. postal regular mail if we didn't have an email address, letting them know that they appear, based on their records, to qualify. To meet, you know, federal due diligence, you know, requirements for distributing these federal funds, we do have to have them respond back and certify that our information is correct, that we've reached the person who we think it is, and some basic information about their business, and give us an up-to-date mailing address. So a response is required. We've made that, we believe, as easy as we possibly could. We would like for them to do it online. They have to enter a little bit of information to verify that they are the business in question. And then after that, it's really just a few clicks of the mouse. It's a one-page verification, certification, all done by clicking the mouse. And so we think quick and easy. If folks do not have internet access, there is a paper form available that asks for the same information that they can send in, and we'll key it in. Once we receive that certification, we can then we can send the money to them, and we do that by direct deposit if we have the correct banking information. In other words, when people pay their sales tax or business tax, they can pay that electronically, and they can choose whether or not they save their banking information. If they have chosen to do that, we will send by direct deposit that money back to the bank account they use to pay us their taxes. So a significant percentage is direct deposited. If not, it's sent by check. And we do direct deposits once a week, and we send out checks daily. So to date, we have distributed a little over $110 million to about 14,500 businesses. And that includes just over $20 million to 2,300 businesses in Davidson County. You know, part of our message right now is that's only about 46% of the total who we believe qualify. So we were working really hard to get the word out for those folks who have not certified their information, so that we can send them the funds. And we would invite anyone and everyone to help us get that word out to folks that we do believe it's an easy process. We have customer service representatives standing by phone or email to help if necessary, or to answer questions. Our call answer rate remains currently at 98-99%, so those folks are reachable if folks need help. We are doing a number of things: media campaigns, email campaigns, speaking to groups as often as we can to try to encourage people to realize if they're one of those businesses that are intended beneficiary to open that email and respond so that we can send the funds to them. And I'll stop there, pause. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. I will say one detail about the structure of the program. The payment is based on annual gross receipts. I already mentioned it caps out at $10 million in annual gross receipts. Actually, 70% of the population, though, are businesses with $500,000 or less in gross receipts. So this is a majority smaller, even within that group, the majority are smaller businesses. The payments range from $2,500 at the low end to $30,000 at the high end, depending on the level of gross receipts.
I have a question. Can you describe just how the amount that goes to each applicant is decided? What's it based on?
It's based on their gross receipts as reported, annual gross receipts as reported on their sales tax or business tax return, whichever one's higher. So, as I mentioned, at the low end of the scale, if you're a business with up to $100,000 in gross receipts, as reported on your tax return, the payment is $2,500. I'm going to do this from memory because I don't have it right in front of me, but from $100,000 to $500,000, the payment is $5,000. From $500,000 to $1 million, goes to $10,000. From $1 million to $5 million in annual gross receipts, it's $20,000. And from $5 million to $10 million in gross receipts, it's $30,000. And that information's on our website, but I think I got that right.
Okay. The numbers that you gave us, the 33,000 businesses qualified and the 14,000 businesses that you served, are those statewide?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any Davidson County breakouts?
Yeah, it's 5,000 businesses, rounding slightly, but that's 5,000 businesses identified as we believe qualify. Okay. We have received 2,300 certifications from those 5,000 businesses, and we've distributed just over $20 million in Davidson County.
Another question. The list of businesses that qualified or were eligible, I didn't see lawn care services or construction or home repair. Are those included? And if not, is there a reason why not?
They are not. That's correct. What we attempted to do was identify the businesses that were directly required to close pursuant to executive order, and those were not in that group.
And of your eligibility requirements, is there a requirement that if you had a felony or something like that, then you automatically wouldn't qualify?
No, there's nothing like that.
Okay.
This is based purely on the information we have in our tax database, and we wouldn't even have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question. Is there any demographic breakdown of the businesses that have already received funding?
We do not have demographics in our tax database, but we did include questions. They are voluntary in terms of the response. You don't have to respond to do your certification, but what we said was, we would like to know more about your business. Would you please answer these questions? And have that, if I can get to the right piece of paper. Statewide, to date, 1,521 of the payments went to folks who self-reported as minority-owned businesses, and 2,754 to businesses that identified themselves as women-owned businesses.
Sorry, what was the second number?
2,754 to women-owned businesses.
that has a small business and it's a personal, like LLC. So basically, from a tax standpoint, it's in effect part of their personal tax return. Does that mean they're not in the database that these types of support would apply to?
They will be there. Any business, whether regardless of how it's organized, sole proprietor, general partnership, LLC, corporation, et cetera, would be identified based on its sales tax account or business tax account. And really the organization of the business does not impact how it does not impact the fact that you would register and file a sales or a business tax return.
And if I started a business on January 1st or February 1st of this year, would there be a record of that yet?
That is an issue. No, we would not pick up businesses that started after December 31st. And that's an issue that's been identified that we're looking at. But that is true because the program is based on annual gross sales, and we looked at we looked at 2019.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, the number of minority-owned and women-owned businesses, were those the businesses that qualified or that actually received?
Those are the businesses that have received payments.
Okay.
Yes, the number that qualify would be larger. I don't have that with me.
That's fine, thank you.
Actually, we don't know until they respond.
Just to clarify, that's out of the 2,300, correct?
Yeah, that would be out of the 14,400 that we have received certifications and made payments to.
So that's statewide, those numbers are?
Yes, statewide numbers, yes.
Okay. Do you have numbers specifically for Davidson County?
I can get them. I apologize, I did not pull that before coming over here, but if there's someone I can send it to, I would be happy to do that.
You can send it here and I'll take care of it. We'll distribute it.
Is there a deadline for turning in those certifications?
Not currently. I mean, we're continuing to look at it. Generally speaking, the CARES Act funds, until something changes, as my understanding is, CARES Act funds have to be utilized by the end of the year.
Yep.
But for this program, currently, there's no deadline.
And the phone operators, do they speak multiple languages?
We do have folks who speak more than one language, not necessarily someone who speaks every language. There's a program for dealing with that. I could try to get you more detail, or certainly if folks are having issues, I would like to, if you'd let me know.
Just one other basic question. Can we assume that if every single business in your database applied for this, that there is sufficient funding to pay them according to the schedule you've established?
Yes. Governor set aside funding to fully fund the program as designed. Yeah.
Question for clarification. You had mentioned that the basis for qualification or certification is annual gross sales, so annual average. But I believe I recall you saying that 25% reduction starting in the month of April was kind of the trigger for when you would know. So has there been any issues with businesses that have, one, complained that their annual gross sales are not relevant to what their impact on the business would be if they started midway through the year? And then two, the challenge between tracking that monthly versus the program being based off of annual sales taxes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've had a few anecdotally, and we're keeping track of those and going to discuss, what to do in those situations. For example, a business that has a lot of sales around Easter in April, and we compare it to last October to do that test. And we picked October rather than last April because we didn't want businesses to have to be open. We wanted to catch the businesses that hadn't been open a full year, right? So, and she pointed out, understandably, that compared to October, her sales had not gone down that much, but compared to last April, she would meet the test. So that would be one example. I wouldn't say it's been widespread or a large number, but there are some like that. And like I said, we're going to keep up with those and discuss how to address those. And just as a point of clarification, the 25% test only applies to those retail store sectors. It's not necessarily the service sectors. But just a reminder.
Is there a restriction on if someone applied earlier in the pandemic in April or May or whenever the program started in June? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there a restriction on how much they can get? So if they got a payment and the pandemic continues, they're still under orders to shut down, can they reapply? And how much money is still available in that fund for businesses?
Right. The program as set up for those 33,000 businesses was just over $200 million. So that's what's been currently set aside for that. And that would fund every business, that's been identified. Currently, if a business does certify, receives a payment, currently that is it for this program. Now that does not mean there could be other rounds, other programs, I guess there are certainly possibilities of where the state may go as when going forward, but this program, as it's currently structured and exists, has sufficient funding for everyone, but everyone would receive just the one payment.
Commissioner Giaragano, I had a couple questions. One was, it appears to me that the two criteria are kind of snapshots based on where the businesses were in March and April, particularly the second one with the 25% reduction for retail stores. And the first criteria, the ones that were affected by the executive orders, is that kind of expressly that they had to close down shop in response to the executive orders, or would that also apply if, it's August and, there was a reduction in their revenue or some kind of lingering effect of how long they could stay open based on the executive orders that's still ongoing now?
I think that's something that will continue to be looked at. Sort of the context of this program was, we were creating it in late April and May. It was announced on June 2nd. And at that time, the focus was businesses are hurting right now and need a bridge, right? And so create a program that identifies these folks as quickly as possible without them having to apply or even know to apply, and have a mechanism to get the money out as quickly as you can. And like I said, it was April, end of April and early May when those executive orders were fresh, and the executive branch had ordered certain businesses to close, and that was the focus. And so it was identify those businesses impacted by the order, that the Department of Revenue has ready information that it can act on as quickly as possible and get the funds out, and
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I believe you said that the fund was $200 million. Of that amount, how much have y'all spent so far?
Roughly 110 million so far.
And I know there's no time limit on spending the funds. Is there like a legal mechanism or authority for a second round of relief to businesses if this goes on for a while and it's clear that, your response rate is capped off? There's not going to be any new businesses respond? Or would that take some type of legislative action or executive action?
I would defer to the governor's office as the financial stimulus accountability group for those kind of questions. I would think there are opportunities, but I wouldn't want to speak on the legality of the use of the funds, because that's really a little outside my my area, my focus is more to administer this program.
The communication campaign to those that have not yet applied.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Is there any continuing communication campaign to those that have not yet applied?
Yes. Just this past week, we've made a big push, as I mentioned, with media and speaking to groups such as the U.S. Small Business Administration, trade groups that represent these industries. And we'll continue to do that anytime we find an opportunity to talk to a group, and we'll continue to advocate this in the media. In addition to those avenues, we have our communication, our official communication initially was through our tax system, which has email capability, or we send a letter. We have migrated that email campaign to our communications office using MailChimp, which has more functionality, more tracking, better graphics, an email address that looks more like something you might open and respond to than necessarily, the email address you see when you get our tax system email, that sort of thing. Just try to make it more accessible and more flexible, and we will continue, to use that communication method. We are also working with Department of Commerce and Insurance licenses, several thousands of these, particularly the close personal care service industries. And they have used their relationship to communicate with folks by email. They are gearing up possibly to even start making calls to folks. We're doing everything we can think of, but we're also open to any suggestions.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. We appreciate the details and what the state is doing. I think that was very helpful. And what I want to do is also make sure, I think what we'll do, we've got several guests here, and we would like to hear they are all working with small businesses here in Davidson County. And what I'd ask each of them to do is maybe spend a really brief time, and then we'll come back to questions. If you could just spend, 3 to 5 minutes, if you want to pick, your top 5 challenges, or what are the things that you are hearing from the small businesses that you are interacting with? What are their greatest needs? And, kind of just what is the environment, so that this committee then can start to, formulate some ideas of how we can use what limited resources we have in the very best capacity. So I'm just going to go down the list as I had on the agenda, and ask for you each share for just a few minutes. And then if we'll hold questions, then we'll ask questions after we hear from everybody. That way we make sure that we hear everything timely. Sound all right? Okay. So Nancy, if you don't mind, Nancy is with the Nashville Business Coalition. We'd love to hear.
Thank you very much. My name's Nancy Stabell. I'm the chairman of the Nashville Business Coalition. We're a political action committee located here in Nashville that represents businesses of all sizes. So from very, very small businesses to some of the largest employers in the city. In addition, in my day job, I'm a lawyer, and I'm the managing partner of the Wood Stabell Law Group. And our sole focus is on small businesses. So where they are pre-revenue up to about $35 million in annual revenue, we look at businesses, entrepreneurs, and investors. And our practice really focuses on, we have all verticals across the city, whether it be construction, whether it be dog walkers, whether it is in the hospitality space. We've got lots of tech companies that we represent. And we are, it's not a big surprise where we're seeing just an incredible need. It's the retail sector, it's the hospitality sector, and entertainment and then travel. Those are the ones that are really for us where we're seeing, because we're seeing other sectors that are having just explosive growth, which is a great story to tell, that they're having lemonade out of this, but it's the obvious ones that are really having the struggle. The questions that we're getting, there's some that are really highly motivated and are being incredibly creative in how they are attacking problems, and they're trying to use technology. They are trying to really change how they're marketing. They are really changing their service offerings. And then there are others that are really struggling to figure out, well, how do I pivot and how do I want to? And I don't know how. And then the question is, some of them may have ideas on how, but they don't know how to go about doing it. So I loved when I got here and I saw Jane was here, is because I'm sending lots of people to her group or other groups like her who are providing just advice and who have mentors and who have business expertise that they can really work with small companies and provide. Some of it's just sounding boards too, and thinking through. Some of it's working on sticky noting, all kinds of ideas, and then thinking through which ones are going to work. A lot of it is, I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs who, they've just been kind of doing stuff on their own and have not even really cultivated networks that they have people that they can reach out to and say, can you help me think through this? That's one of the single biggest challenges that I'm seeing, is having, that outside filter that will help them say, what is a way that I can go about changing, and what do I need to do? And then once I get the idea, how do I drive that to implementation? And then is, where do I get the resources to do it? And sometimes the resources are really small. Sometimes they're gargantuan. Again, the bigger the enterprise, the harder it's going to be to fill that, and especially when you're looking in the hospitality space. Until we, and they're the ones that are really mentally having the biggest challenge in thinking through, how do I adjust my business, because it's a long road to go. So for my group, and in particular with the clients and the businesses that I come across on a daily basis, and it's truly daily that I get new calls from people. Again, a lot of it is just looking for guidance and looking for somebody to talk to and looking for direction and resources. So whether it's to Jane's group, whether it's to the Tennessee Small Business Development Center, whether it is, all of them, I'm like, to get money in this environment, because they're like, well, we need a bank. Well, no, wait, you got to have a plan. You got to have a really good plan before you're going to be able to get money in this environment, just because everybody's having to be thoughtful about it. And the banks are having a hard time figuring out who's got to, who's going to make it, who's got a solid business plan going forward. And so if you come in with a real thought out plan, then it's actually really possible. So that's what we're seeing, really, again, all across our community, because our businesses are all over Davidson County, is really in those specific industries, and then that's the need.
Great, thank you. And we'll then jump to Jane with the Nashville Entrepreneur Center.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Nancy. And I'm here with Bryn Plummer, and I brought Bryn because Bryn has been working with our organization and is the chair of our diversity and inclusion, and she works with a lot of our entrepreneurs here in town, and she is on the street, so to speak. But I did just want to thank you all. This is a serious issue. We had a call with David's group last week. What we really work to do is to connect entrepreneurs with the resources they need to increase their probability of success. And we also work with the entire entrepreneur community. And that's why I said we're not just the startup center, we are the entrepreneur center. And so if people are stuck, they call us. And we work to try to get them to the right people or the right entity or pathways or others that might be able to help them. Bryn oversaw a program where we went and vetted community partners. And we actually have the ability to partner with entities in the town, such as Pathways and others, to be able that we're putting people in touch with the resources they need. I will say we switched to be a virtual organization the first day because we are a Google for Startup partner, and we saw this happening in other parts of the world. And so we not only didn't miss any program, we're, I think, 130% more programming, and we've also expanded some of the programs to the entire entrepreneur community. Things such as exactly what David's talking about. I'm sitting there thinking, we just need to do a webinar on this, David, and we need to advertise to the retail and the hospitality industries in particular to let them know that not only this, but other things. The loan forgiveness. I mean, anything that we're hearing entrepreneurs are needing, we really are trying to respond, not just with programming, but also connecting them to the right people. As Nancy said, it is a community, which is why we opened in phase 2, and our doors are open. We had a lot of people that were impacted by the tornado that we were able to house. And quite honestly, guys, they need the internet. They need the desk. And if you walk through there today, which I do every single day and talk to them and I bug them, but they smile. But it's, thank God you're open. I can't work from home. I've got 3 kids at home. or whatever the needs are. So it really is powerful. That being said, I'm gonna let Bryn talk about what she sees the needs are in our local community on the street.
Thank you. As Jane mentioned, we do work with about, in any given year, we usually interface with between 1,000 and 2,000 entrepreneurs. We keep about 120 entrepreneurs in our high-touch programs, everything from micro enterprises all the way up to entrepreneurs who are in Series A or Series B of funding. And we see 4 areas of need and support across the COVID crisis. 1, in the technical domain of e-commerce, digital expertise, and tech implementation. So building e-stores, building Shopify accounts, that sort of technical expertise, and then knowing how to appropriately set aside funds through the taxation for that. Strategy in the business development and sales space, so knowing how to sell in the strategy of going to, whether it's marketing campaigns, paid spend, that sort of thing. So how do you sell through a pandemic? On the financial side, cash flow management and lean financial operations, and in that domain, we've leaned really heavily on our mentors, advisors, and our community partners. So Pathways, SCORE, we've been sending a lot of people to Pathways, QuickBooks boot camps over the COVID crisis. And then also SCORE has been doing a really great job getting people access to understanding your what to do during lean times. I second everything that you shared, Nancy, in networking and knowledge capital. Our entrepreneurs just need more know-how right now, and I think in some ways this has forced people to come out of their entrepreneur cave and to connect with people, because there's people who've been through 2008 crisis, we have people who've been through the 1978 gas crisis in our entrepreneur set and our advisor set who can talk about that. One area of additional support that we continue to see, we've started hosting pitch competitions for entrepreneurs across Tennessee. Through that, we've been able to provide grants to 5 entrepreneurs in the form of a direct cash deposit to them that they're able to use for business development. But we've had over 150 people apply to that program to pitch to this broad audience. We would love to give more people capital, and specifically, cash is king right now, so access to capital and then non-dilutive investment, especially because we disproportionately work with startups who are not often eligible for traditional loans because they don't have hard assets. And they also usually don't have big teams. They're also not eligible for much of the PPP money. So that's an area of need that we continue to see for all of our businesses, access to capital in the form of cash and non-dilutive investment.
Just one other thing on the Pitch for Good. I'm going to pitch. We have Women Founders Edition next week. The deadline to apply is this Friday. So if you all know any women entrepreneurs, please ask them to apply. And we have them every month. And so again, as Bryn said, Launch Tennessee actually gave us our first grant to be able to give prize money, or we call them grants, to the winners. And then we had our Black Founders Edition 2 weeks ago, and then we had someone step up and donate scholarships to the EC for all of the finalists. And because the high-touch programs, 84% of those that we work with are still in business today. So the program, I walked into this, I can take no credit, but the programs we are providing really are having an impact and creating value in our economic prosperity locally. And so I think that that's really important, and someone was moved so that we have all of those that are now coming to the EC, and then Women's Edition is next week. We have more than 150 people usually watch and do an audience favorite. And as I tell any entrepreneur, it gives you a chance to get in front of 150 potential customers. And so, and then we go all throughout. December is actually for Nashville. Like, what is the innovation and forward-thinking ideas to help Nashville be an innovative and forward-thinking city? So we've just really aligned it with our community and the needs in our community. So I just want to do a pitch. We'd love to have everybody participate and watch and vote.
Excellent, and thank you for being here. We're going to move on then to Pathway Lending. Clint, Gwen, thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Clint Gwynn. I'm with Pathway Lending. We see a lot of our partners in this room today. Pathway is a community development financial institution. We're certified by the U.S. Treasury Department to provide access to capital and services, primarily training, to underserved entrepreneurs across Tennessee. We're headquartered here in Nashville and Metro Center, where we have our SBA Women's Business Center is headquartered there. We run about 1,500 people through our training at the Women's Business Center each year. 62% of those folks are people of color that come to our programs. And then we also operate the Tennessee and Kentucky Veterans Business Outreach Center, which focuses on veterans and entrepreneurship training for them. We actually go on base at all the bases in Tennessee and Kentucky, as well as support those great veterans after they leave the military. So we did some focus groups early on in March through our Women's Business Center. And really the gist of the conversations that came out of it, we call it resiliency in our house, but it's, I just want my business to be here when this is over. How do I get there? And what's it going to take for me to get there? And so it really boils down to, as we've gone through it and continue to adjust and having more and more listening sessions, it's how do I pivot, I think was a term previously used, my business. And then more importantly, when I decide to pivot, how do I pay for that upfront cost of doing the pivot? If we look around the country, Gwinnett County in Georgia, for instance, they gave a $15 million grant to a CDFI to provide that pivot capital. Part of that is a forgivable loan, and the other part is a long-term loan. What we're seeing in the businesses that we work with, and we've got about 380 current portfolio clients across the state. Average relationship is somewhere around $125,000 to $150,000. We go as small as $5,000 and as large as $2 million. So what we're seeing is they are burning through their owner's equity, which is the owner's equity that they put in the business for that first 2 months, 3 months until they started generating revenue and it started flowing. They have now burned through all that revenue. And so they're trying to figure out a way, I don't have revenue, I don't have any cash coming in. How do I pivot my business, pay for that expense to get to a new line of business or move my business to where it's going to work and then have the slow repayment of that? So we've launched 2 products. We started with an emergency loan product, and then we realized we were going to be in this longer than an emergency loan product. And so we shifted to a restart product, which has a much gentler long-term repayment of the capital. No real upfront expenses for the business to be able to get there. But that's really risky lending at the end of the day, and we can't do as much of it as we'd like to do. But there are some great examples around the country of what some other cities have done with some of their CARES Act money to be able to get patient capital out into the market. I'm a big believer that if at all possible, you try to create a perpetuity program. You don't just, no offense to the state, y'all are under some criteria with regard to giving grants. But if the city has some CARES Act money, try to think about how does it recirculate? What can we do to put it out, get it back, and then go help the next entrepreneur as we go forward? But really, it's about how do we be a resilient company, and then where do we get the capital to be that company in the long run? So thank you for letting us be here today.
Glad you're here. Thank you. And next we'll then hear from Angela Crane-Jones with the Nashville Business Incubation Center.
Hello. As you said, I'm Angela Crane-Jones with the Nashville Business Incubation Center. I've been with the organization for 17 years, and the organization has been around for 34 years. And we work with minority women and veteran firms, but we consider our claim to fame to be helping them scale. There are always a lot of hoopla around the startup, but how do we help build sustainable companies that can weather these storms that we're in currently? And, some of those that we can, have a claim to fame on is like the Christie Cookies, the Zycron with Darryl Freeman. Even through this storm, some of our clients that has graduated from our center, like EJ of Slim and Huskies and Crystals, with Grilled Cheesery, they're still surviving, but that's because they went through our, program and really came up with a plan. They know, how to market. They were already a digital business. And if I had to say, what am I seeing? Obviously, it's the decline in the revenue, and it's really for us. it's the micro enterprises, you know, because there's a lot of confusion around when we say small business. We think we're talking about, you know, women and minority, you know, saying firms or even veteran firms, but we need to really look at what are the micro enterprises that did not qualify for funding, because again, you have a great resource like, you know, saying Pathway Lending, but if they don't have the ducks in a row, it's difficult for, you know, saying Clint to give a loan, or they're going to the wrong resource. They're going to the larger bank when they need to go to a community bank or a CDFI. You know, the second thing that I'm seeing a lot of, again, they don't have a digital presence, which some of my counterparts have already spoken about that. And then they just have a lack, for me, I always say they have a lack of people just being honest with them. When you come to the incubation center, you're going to get pure honesty. And right where we are today, you don't need anything but honesty. And so I would like to take, you know, just a quick minute or two and give you 3 examples of what I've seen in the community. You know, a food truck business that had no real digital presence at all. They were functioning, you know, purely off events, you know, and hey, Nashville was prospering, so it made sense. But when we went into COVID-19, it was dead in the water. Although we see some food trucks, businesses were still surviving, but a lot of them, retail and food and hospitality, didn't have a digital presence. The second is on Jefferson Street. We have a company named, it's called Nail and Hair Gallery, Michelle Harris. And again, because of the state, she had, you know what I'm saying, she had to close. But at the same time, we had been working with her due to gentrification, relocating her over on Clarksville Highway where she's purchased a building. Well, imagine the difficulty she's going in and having access to capital when she's closed, so she doesn't have the revenue coming in, and at the same time, she's trying to, you know, build out her space. And then the third one that really, you know, tugged on me, and we really tried to work with the farmers market to see how we can help, is the ones that are in farmers, you know, in farmers market where they're opening back up. But there's one business in there that was opening a grocery store that started last fall and was supposed to open in March. Well, she got caught up because the Safer Home order, and the farmers market has been really good to her because they did have rent relief, but obviously they can't continue, you know, doing that. But as we dug deeper and with her, we realized, although she was about to open and she spent over $50,000 in building her facility, she didn't have a digital presence, you know. And so what I had to step back and do, because I was doing the same thing a lot of other people were, I was moving in that direction, and that was having a lot of webinars, you know, and bringing awareness to what is available out there. But the last thing, which I should have said first, but people don't know how to execute. You can give them the information, but they get frustrated when they get to the site, and it seems easy to a lot of people, but to the layman, it's not. And they need that hand holding, and how do they move through that process? And so for me, I got lucky. P. Bird or the First Foundation called and said, you know, Angela, I can see what's going on in the world, and as well as in Nashville. We have a lot of companies that have been hit by the tornado. We're talking about we're moving less than 2 weeks later, we're going into the Safer at Home order. What do you see? And so I just asked Pete, could I be honest with him? And he allowed me to be very honest. And I said, we can no longer send people from, you know, like place to place because they get frustrated and then they don't want to move forward. Or they go somewhere and they're not really being met where they are. You know, I mean, like really having to handhold them because they are not tech savvy. They don't understand, you know what I'm saying, the loan process. And so Pete, within a week, gave us $150,000. That allowed me, from a capacity standpoint, to hire another staff member, but also do a deeper dive in holding those businesses accountable over the next 6 months and then touching base with them quarterly after the 6 months. And so far, those 3 businesses I just told you about, I'm gonna just give you a recap of where we are today, and it's within 30 days. The grocery store is about to open. We're praying on, you know what I'm saying, on Monday. But she'll have a digital presence. She'll be able to let people know where she is. She also have e-commerce on her site and talk her through how to use Instacart. She doesn't have any idea, and she's been to several places trying to figure that out. We were able to, you know, do that with her, but that was due to the funding, not necessarily, you know, me. And then the Nail and Hair, you know, gallery, again, it was helping her access the EID loan because she thought she didn't qualify, or, you know, what does it really mean to go into additional debt? So we're able to educate her. And then, you know, the food truck business, we've been able to help her be innovative. again, where now she can have, we're calling it at this time, we're testing the focus, but a brunch in a bag. You know, so in the sense of people that are busy, they got the kids at home, they can just, you know, order food, and so she can still keep going. But she wasn't gonna be able to do that without having a digital presence and an e-commerce site. And those individuals, some received PP funding, but most did not receive PP funding. And the main reason, because they're self-employed. And that's that micro enterprise piece that we really, you know, if I had to give any advice, is we really address the micro enterprise, because there's a lot of confusion around small business. I'm sorry if I took up too much time.
Thank you all. And I'm going to let the committee, you know, at your will. We're at 1 o'clock. Let's have questions that you want to have addressed while our guests are here. We do have a little bit of an agenda to cover, but that's at your will as far as we get. So open it up to questions.
I know we took time and kind of sped up to go through a few people, but I heard something that I think seemed like a common thread, and I think it is allowing businesses to pivot and transition. I think we have a lot of businesses, being a small business myself, understanding that, you know, the city of Nashville, you're taught, you're groomed to make personal connections. It's a great city to meet people, to greet people, but now we're forced away from that. And it sounds like it's a very prevalent problem, no matter how big your business may be or how small it may be with micro institutions. Has there been any, because I've heard people mention that they've seen what other cities have done. Are there any examples that have really done well that you think have started to meet businesses across the spectrum, help them to adjust to what's going on now, and then really how to pivot to the future of, you know, we don't know how long we'll be in this situation. While we have a shot clock on our funds right now, people want their businesses to be here after that shot clock and into the future. So is there anything that's, one, worked well in the immediate term and then also has shown at least promise for long-term benefit to businesses?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I think as far as working well and creating community, which I think was the first part of what you said, which is absolutely essential. That's one thing we've learned, all the webinars in the world, what they really need is connection. So again, some actually come to the EC. On the other hand, we actually do these small breakout groups, and we have like Founders Friday, or, I mean, all different types of programs where they can connect to people who are similarly situated and just talk about things. The other thing is on pivoting, we've actually advised some not to pivot. I mean, the reality is some entrepreneurs aren't going to make it. and so it's also just a little bit as what you just said, being real and really talking about the business and whether it makes sense. And then I totally agree with Clint, if there would be a way to be able to utilize the money so that it goes in perpetuity, I think that is so important. And that's what I have seen a couple of other cities do, and whether it's a public-private partnership or whether it is we're going to make loans, but then it's a long-term repayment or something so that it isn't just a one shot in the arm for right now, but it actually has long-term sustainability to help the overall entrepreneurial economic community, because we don't know how long this is going to last, unfortunately, because entrepreneurs are notoriously optimistic. And so, you know, we just always think it's tomorrow. But at the end of the day, it's, all right, let's just really manage through this. So we have some that are surviving, we have some that are thriving, and we have some that just aren't going to make it. And we also want to counsel them that that's okay too, and it's not a personal failure. And so I think that that's where, but the money and the access to some money to be able to get them the resources they need and make sure they use it prudently, and then it's there in perpetuity, is what I see other communities of doing that have been beneficial.
This is Clint. I'll talk a little bit about what we did with our emergency and restart. So we developed a resiliency training track. So it had 2 hours of classroom, it had about an hour of homework, and then every entrepreneur got an hour with one of our advisory services consultants. So we have 6 CPAs on staff, a marketing consultant, and a capital access consultant that work with entrepreneurs to work through whichever problem they have. That worked really well in that they learned some stuff, they had some homework, and then they had a one-on-one interaction. What we've also seen come back recently is we also run a bunch of cohorts of 10 or less small business owners that can work together. That model is, people are getting used to it in a virtual environment. Originally, it was classroom structure and standing times. Now it's a little more virtual, and we are seeing more of those connections being made at the end of the day. And so there is an opportunity, I think. You've got a lot of great resources in Nashville between the organizations that are here and then some others that aren't. And we have done a much better job as this group of organizations and others than in many cities in working together and building those linkages. And I'm going to give the EC a lot of credit for that and really trying to drive building those linkages with all the other organizations. So I think you have a lot more going on here than we see in a lot of other cities. We're in Memphis, we're in Chattanooga, we're in Knoxville, we're in Birmingham. And so the collaboration in Nashville is much higher than we see in a lot of other markets.
I just want to say that in my community too, 2 points. One, the cohorts are really big game changers when you can put people in groups where they can collaborate, where they can get feedback, where they can be really honest with each other, where they can, show getting that and just brainstorming. I mean, that when I look across my client base, that's something that really makes a difference between who's winning and who's not winning. And the second thing is whether I'm working in the private funding community or whether I'm working with my nonprofit clients and they're looking for nonprofit dollars, that funding community, it's very outcome driven. What are you going to do with it and how are you going to show us? And to me, as I sit and think about the task that you have, it's a finite amount of resources that you have and a really, really big need. So how do you generate outcomes? How do you come up with great stories that you can say, not everybody can be saved? I mean, we're all in that business right now. And I've got a list of my bankruptcy friends that are gearing up for what's going to happen in January when all the government money runs out. So, it's okay. It's just okay. But where can there be really great outcomes and stories that you can really elevate? Entrepreneurship and some of these small businesses in Nashville is really, I think, the challenge that certainly that's the answer that my clients are answering to their funding partners. So.
Turn off, I'm on. Okay. I do, just to answer what Nancy said, is the other thing that a time like this brings is creativity. So you have some people that may have lost their job that really didn't have the guts to be an entrepreneur that are actually wanting to do it. So like our pre-flight program, which is a 14-week, don't quit your day job yet, unless you've been laid off, and see, so you really think you want to be an entrepreneur and go through the logistics of it. We have a large applicant pool, and thankfully we've had private donors be able to give scholarships because obviously these people don't have the money to pay for the program. And so we've had people step up to scholarship a lot of our program participants that otherwise wouldn't be able to pay for them. A little bit to your point, because you believe that entrepreneurship can help those that really do have a problem, a solution to a problem that people value enough to pay enough so you have profitability. And that's what we're always looking for and trying to help them understand. So that's the other thing is, while yes, it's a bad time, it's also the time that the light bulbs really go off and people are willing to take chances and risk. And so being able to surround them with the resources to allow them to be able to do that.
Hello? Okay, thank you. I want to piggyback off of both Jane and Nancy. One of the things that, obviously, I don't have the foresight to know we were going to have COVID-19, but we started Nashville Business Incubation Center over a year and a half ago was creating a pathway. Because one of the things we saw, again, people are working. Hello? Okay. Those working their 9-to-5 jobs, they also were, in the gig economy. And so we created a program called Foundations in partnership with the Urban League here in Nashville, as well as getting funding for the First Horizon. So it would be completely free. Because, again, when you're trying to make those decisions or that leap, a lot of times they don't have the funding. And then we created what we call a biz quiz. So it's not subjective, it's you going through the quiz. Are you paying taxes, to the city? Are you, are you registered, properly? Do you have EIN number? And it's logic-based, so it puts you in the different pathways you need to go through. And so once you finish the 12-week course, then you take the quiz again. Do you need assistance with having a strategy? Because many people start a business without having any type of strategy. And so we do that for 5 weeks, working with them, creating 18-month goals, and then knowing they're going to be measured every 2 weeks over the next 90 days and helping hold them accountable. And then from there, they need help with execution. That's why a lot of people struggle, is the execution. And our goal is to build sustainable businesses. So there's a clear path, because the failure rate, we all know, in the first 5 years is more than 50%. And so we have a program called Groundwork, and that's what the First Foundation funded. And then we do the one-on-one with the clients that have really scaled. They have created, 5 jobs, and they're at $1 million+ dollars. And that's our outcome, is to help create jobs and, $1 million in revenue, but having a clear path for them to, go through and then refer them if they need funding to a Clint, or not Clint, even though I do send the pathway, or, to knowing the right bank to go to, having a true path and not going to, I hope nobody's with Bank of America, but, like the larger corporate, banks, we're going to the smaller banks. Or if they're coming, they want to be invested in, then refer them to, the EC. So I think I'm saying all that to say we have a great ecosystem here. I sit on the National Innovation Board, and we in Nashville do have great relationships and enough services to service the different individuals that are needed, the different services that are needed in the community, and try to work together.
Okay, I'll be pretty quick, but one thing that I wanted to bring up, I'm a CPA by trade, so I believe cash is king and queen. So one thing that we've noticed, we provide, in conjunction with the Nashville Business Incubation Center, we provide management and technical assistance to small businesses through the 7J program with the Small Business Administration. And we service all 50 states. And one thing that we always train our clients on is to diversify revenue. And that's coming in a number of ways. A lot of these small businesses are minority businesses and so forth. So we teach them how to get their different certifications, their women-owned business certification, their service disabled vet, their hub zone, all of those, because it makes them more marketable to the different federal agencies to diversify their revenue and not be heavily dependent on one stream of revenue. So one thing that we noticed throughout this pandemic, the firms that are the companies that had diversified their revenue, that had commercial type contracts, had federal contracts, they're breezing through it. And so that's why it becomes so important that, like everybody is saying here, that they have to have those business core structures set up firmly when they start out so that they can be successful even through a pandemic. Business continuity planning is one thing that we're focusing on now, developing policies and procedures, operating procedures, because if they do shut down, they should have all of that stuff documented so that the business can keep rolling. So those are some of the things that we see, but we notice that diversifying revenue is extremely important so they can be successful in the long run.
Thank you all for all of the information you've provided today. It's very helpful in our charge and making the decision on how we can help address the crisis locally. I just have a question for the Incubation Center. When you mentioned the program that the Frisk Center helped support to address the business relief here for your clients, how many, you mentioned 150,000, how many businesses or clients can you support with that amount? And what kind of support are you providing? Is it help with filling out applications, loans, getting certified, helping with pivot, e-commerce? Can you just describe what kind of services you're providing with that particular program specifically?
So specifically with the Groundwork program, we're, one, helping them become a digital business, because we know they're not going to survive without being a digital business with the e-commerce plug-in. Two, helping them get prepared to get the financials, which is something we do all the time. We see that day in and day out. We have clients that may come to us that are already doing $500,000 or $1 million, but they don't have the financial house in order. So we're helping them get their financial house in order to be able to get the funding that they need. Then thirdly, to Eric's point, helping them put processes in place because they're not going to be able to, to scale their company if they don't have those systems in place. And fourthly, is really shifting their mindset, for where they're working on the business versus being in the business. And then also helping them evaluate. We have a crisis management. Thankful to HCA, they helped me about 4 years ago. So we're helping them with, crisis management. It's this document that we go over that's like 30-some pages that really help them go through to see what is the action plan that we need to put in place. I think Nancy said earlier, it's okay if they have to close down, but we want to make sure they close down, in a proper way, because some people just close and they don't realize 3-4 years later they owe thousands of dollars. And then also, is it just renegotiating the debt they have? Just go ahead and sit down with Pathway Lending or the banker and, let them know what their situation is. So with all that being said, for the groundwork program, we can do 40 students. It's cohort based. We're also offering other programming that staff person that we could hire. So with the $150,000, deep technical assistance is 40 individuals, and then they're also helping sponsor the foundation program so we can expand the capacity, because what we're seeing when people start business, they're not going to get their license from the city. They're not getting an EIN number, so we're trying to help with those basic foundational things that most people don't do when they start the business. So in short, it's 40 deep technical assistance, and then several other 100 people that can go through the foundations program for free.
Mary Jo, what does a loan look like for the CARES Act, since we've been doing grant type right now?
That is a great question, and as Clint was talking about it, that is one of the finer points that I will have to ask for some legal interpretation, because if a loan is given and paid back, it's very specific in the guidance that the loan has to either go back to Treasury or reused in additional COVID-related response. So the perpetuity idea, I don't think works with the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So I'd be curious. Clint, you may have a response to that.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, in a lot of the work, we're also doing some work with the state on some of their funds as well. We have seen in other states that they've done it. They read that section of the Q&A from the Treasury Department as if the state or the federal or local government makes the loan, that it is recapturable by Treasury, any repayments that come back. They're reading it as if it's granted out to another entity, and that entity deploys the capital in a loan or an equity-like investment, then it would not be recapturable. The governor's office, I will say, is trying to get some clarification from Treasury on that. But there have been a number of other states and municipalities that have taken that position. In our product, we have a very long payment structure so that the first payment is well down the road. One of the reasons for that in the design is to give the business time to recover. And it also would give the business and the municipality time to see what Treasury actually does over time with regard to potential recapture. So you can push that down the road, if you will.
Yeah.
And some of the municipalities that are doing it are structuring it similarly. And then if it does look like a recapture is in place, they may just grant the funds to the business.
And then the other thing I was thinking of is, even if it's not a loan, one thing that we've done at the EC, and that's one thing, even when I went back to the original founding documents, it's almost creating this circle of giving, so that if in fact you receive these funds and you actually get through this and you're thriving, there is some type of an understanding that you then will donate to help that next generation. And so I think there's different ways to do it other than the traditional loan per se, but a way to be able to, and like I said, we do that in the best of times at the EC, that everything you're getting is subsidized by the goodwill of other human beings and governments. And so ideally, we're going to increase your probability of success in working alongside you. And then when you're successful, you too are going to give back to help that next generation. You know, I will say I don't know that that's really been captured until I arrived, but it's being captured now. And so I even think of when I say perpetuity, there's just different ways to do it where the money could be deployed now to help these organizations that are truly in a crisis, but let them not forget that the goodwill of others have helped them get through so that they want to pay it forward.
Right.
Just one example of that. So the city of Memphis has basically a consortium of entrepreneur supports that work through a single organization called Epicenter. And they have both an opportunity fund and a fund that is earmarked for underrepresented founders, primarily women, people of color, and then veterans who receive those funds. So we're actually exploring starting something similar in Nashville that would be earmarked for graduates of our programs. That would be non-dilutive cash, grants, that sort of thing. That also can, and then the way that would work, kind of illustrating what Jane is saying. So let's say, for example, we have someone who graduates from one of our Stage 2 programs, and they are building whatever they're building, and they happen to receive a grant of $20,000, potentially putting in that recipient's stipulations as they sign their agreement. One day, when I am successful, I would agree to pay, 10% of my initial investment back into this fund. So they would, one day when they're successful, 7 to 10 years down the road, if you were an investor, that's when you'd see your investment. They agree to kick that $2,000 back of their initial investment back into the fund. Yeah. So there's different cities who are exploring things like that. And it also, I think one of the other things that we see is in a city like Nashville and then really across the Southeast, tons of investment in our philanthropic and nonprofit community. Now we're trying to take those same behaviors that our citizens show overwhelmingly and makes Nashville a great place to live in our nonprofit sector and bring that over to our for-profit sector. So how can we build this sense of not just philanthropy, but really reinvestment, bring that same behavior that we see overwhelmingly in this town for all of our great 501c3s, bringing it over to this segment as well.
Are there any other questions from our committee?
One. Have the different organizations that have come today, have y'all identified or quantified an amount of money that your organization needs in order to reach number one and then service the businesses specifically in Davidson County that need help? And if so, how much is that?
I'll go. I think there are two pieces to that question. I think there's the training and assistance piece of that question, which is very expensive for all of us to do. And then there's, I think, the capital piece of that question as well, because one won't work without the other. And so I hope you all think about it from that perspective as you work on trying to figure out how to help small businesses. What I would say is smaller and more broadly distributed may not be best. Some of these businesses need enough runway, if you will, to get 60, 90 days down the road. And so in modeling our program, our Restart program, we were giving businesses 3 months of operating expenses so that they would have 90 days of funding to be able to get them to revenue generation. So if you look at it as a manufacturer, you buy raw materials, you produce the product, you sell the product, and then you get paid. So your cycle is long. If you're a restaurant, your cycle's hopefully pretty short. But we gotta look at it as a long-term solution, which means we won't solve it for everybody. And so there will be some that don't get it. On the technical assistance side, that's just how much do you want to give? Do you want to do group? Do you want to do individual? And, individual's expensive. We're fortunate. We've got a few grants that allow us to do some individual, but we can give you real numbers on that very easily. But I do hope you think out of it from both sides because I think they're both critical.
Sorry, I was going to say, Angela, I thought she was going to comment on that.
I was.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say ditto to what Clint just said. I'm hoping we don't think just, giving out loans is going to, solve the problem. We definitely need the management and technical assistance piece, and one, helping them through the crisis, and two, helping them know that if they work on their business now, that they will get through this, or they pivot, or it's okay to, to close. So I just wanted to ditto what Clint said as far as the dollar amount. We can do the same thing. It's just depending on how many, people you want to save or what dollar amount you would like to give.
Yeah, I understand that there's both sides of it for sure. And in fact, I've been a small business owner, and so I think that it's irresponsible to just loan somebody money or grant them money without a plan, because that money you may as well just have lit it on fire. So I totally get that, and I feel like it would be my opinion that whatever money we either decide to loan or grant, or, however we can figure out, I think that's we got to get that question answered. But that a requirement that these business owners have to work with one or a combination of these different groups in order to give them the best, set them up for success, and giving them money is just not, that's for this, that's what the state's doing, which is great. Everybody needs cash, but we got to know what to do with it. So again, from each group's perspective, from their training, their outreach, their, what they need in order to reach who needs help and to be able to service them, have you been able to quantify what that need is for that specific part of it? Then we can get to, okay, how much money do these, do these businesses need, whether it's a grant or a loan or a combination of the two? Am I asking that right? Does that make sense at all? Okay.
I just wanted to say, as one who's in the for-profit space as opposed to the nonprofit space for this, I can't tell you how many people come into my office have no idea that any of these companies and these resources exist. And so one of the great things that you can do is publicize every one of these groups and the resources that are out there that are just for the asking. Because as I tell people, and they're like, oh, really? Well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, look on the internet, or just call, show up at her door. And people have no fathom. I send people to the Tennessee Small Business Development Center all the time. I'm like, it's free. It's just free. Go down there. They'll help you with the business plan. So if that's one thing that just comes out of this is, and also awareness that there are resources out there available to people, that there's actually a right way to go about doing some of these things, and that people who really want to help, that's a huge win. They need resources to deliver the services, but you just wouldn't believe what people don't know.
So perhaps maybe an idea. We knew this was going to be a pretty robust conversation. It wasn't going to be a one-day, 90-minute conversation to come to a conclusion. Maybe we could ask for you all to send that to us. The committee will meet again next week, and that will allow you to put maybe a little bit to pen and paper and think about, I think we're trying to look at numbers served. I think we're trying to optimize the limited resource that we have, and how can we serve the most small businesses really through and guide them through success. So I don't want to speak for the committee, but if you all would be open to that, I'm seeing mostly head nods, that if we could ask all of you, all of our guests to get back to me with, an idea that would present, what level of funding serves how many. And I think that's what we're trying to get at.
And Mary Jo, could I ask for one additional fact that can maybe be put into the information we received? I think that, first of all, very much appreciate the presentation. It was extremely helpful, and the spirit of collaboration was evident. I guess I also know that we're trying to balance the CARES Act funds, or state funds, there are local funds, but to the extent that you have applied for, potentially as a nonprofit, for grants and support from the state that may be supporting your programs, give us a little information on that as well, because again, we're trying to look at the big picture in terms of where the gaps are. We would like to know kind of the extent to which you guys have already been able to qualify for other support.
Can I just ask two more things? We're potentially going to be sending a bunch of businesses your way that want to apply for this relief. And so I just want to know if you all are equipped to handle just a bunch of people reaching out. And I also need to look out for, you know, minority businesses that might not they might not be fluent in English. And so I want to make sure that you all have the capacity to take that on as well.
I can answer yes. I will say we've actually met about 2 months ago, anticipating that maybe something like this would actually happen, and then it didn't. And so we put our plans on the shelf, so to speak, as far as how many people and what would be the most cost-effective, efficient way to distribute funds, but also align it with the programs. And so we can definitely answer the questions. A little bit, just to Sarah's point, a little bit of difference is we do receive money from the state and local government on an annual basis to run our programs. We were looking at possibly creating a new program that this would deliver money directly to the entrepreneurs, and a program to and so again, like for our Pitch for Goods, you know, we'll have 150 to 200 applicants, and we narrow it down to 9 for our program. So vetting, you know, collecting a lot, vetting, and then selecting who we think have the most potential is something that we definitely can do. And then we'll definitely address the language barrier as well. But I just wanted a little clarification on that, Sarah, as far as, because in my mind, and I may be wrong, I'm looking at almost a new program that would distribute money directly to the entrepreneurs that go along with the programs we already are doing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I also want to add, when we're collecting information, if we can also make sure that we get the follow-up from Department of Revenue about the number of minority and women-owned businesses that receive funding out of that 2,300 that he mentioned. So,
okay.
But also I have a comment, and this is more so for the committee. It sounds to me that there are like 3 particular areas of importance and priority that we should be looking at when we're looking at business relief, CARES relief, and they are a better communication, a marketing about what services are available. So maybe looking at directing funds towards that. Second, one-on-one direct services for businesses. For example, help with applying for PPP, help for pivoting e-commerce, signing up for certifications to qualify for state and local business certifications. And then third, grants for businesses, micro businesses particularly, that don't qualify for PP and other grant forms. So just as we're thinking about the funds, or how we're going to distribute funds, or what those priorities would be, those stand out as the 3 areas that are the most need based on what I'm hearing today.
Excellent.
Can I comment on your talks about the PPP? First of all, the program's expired, and right now it's not clear that there's going to be a renewal of it.
There are still funds available.
But all of those funds, those applications had to be in last Friday.
I think she's talking about the state.
Oh, for the state? Okay. Okay. Because I was going to say, the amount of resources out there that we're trying to get people to PPP money, and I mean, that's not where I would spend a lot of time and energy, is on those state grants. That, I mean, they're not available anymore, but there was so many people working for it, and some people just.
Well, what I meant is help with applying, you know, not having if they're financials or as it was stated earlier, going to a smaller bank as opposed to a big bank, that kind of support is what I'm talking
about. I also want to put it on the committee's radar. I agree with Councilwoman Gamble that we need to prioritize that have been helped by the state, minority-owned businesses, since that total number for statewide is extremely low. But I'm also not inclined to help businesses who have been outright not listening to health orders that have been given and that were open when they were supposed to be closed, seeing as we needed to be helping our community and looking out for them. So I'm not inclined to help those businesses.
All right. I know we could go on and on, but again, a big thank you to our guests on short notice, joining us today and really giving us all of the information and really a view of what you're seeing. And thank you for serving our small businesses. And I kind of echo Sarah. It was great to see the partnership that you all have with each other, and feel like this is a great avenue for us to continue to consider. So thank you for being here. All right. I will look to the committee to see how far down the agenda you all want to move. I think we can make some of it pretty quick. Ashley, do you want to give us our kind of a federal and state legislative update? It's, I think, short.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. On the federal side, there's no new update. There's additional guidance came out. The form in front of you is highlighted with the changes made, so you don't have to read line by line and try to figure it out for yourself. And so that's on there for you. Right now they're stalled in talks, so we won't know anything for a while. They're on recess. The other from the state, there's no real new information. They discussed in their last meeting that likely they would have additional funding for small businesses, but they've not released it yet, so we don't know if they're going to or what it looks like. Frankly, they're probably waiting more on guidance from the federal side for the unemployment insurance and what that means to them than anybody else. Department of Labor has not issued that guidance yet. From the federal side, not the state.
Yeah.
And
just to clarify, you were saying there's no change because the House and Senate never came together, and the president's executive order
exactly
potentially may have stalled that from moving forward. And the guidance that Ashley mentioned addresses the executive order that the unemployment would be continued, but 25% of it would have to be funded by the state. So that's created a little bit of a now the state doesn't know, are they going to be using more of their coronavirus relief fund for the unemployment fund? So
they are meeting today, the state portion is, and so hopefully we'll get an update on that for next week for y'all.
And we do not have to really necessarily go through this unless you have questions, but I did provide the updated framework, really just moving that $2.5 million that we're going to work on getting to the council for food insecurity relief. So I've moved that over to the approved. That's approved by you, not yet by council, which just kind of gives us that update. There were, I adjusted the fire request based on recent conversations that Chief Swan had, and really narrowing his focus. And then one of the things that you all had asked for at the last meeting was really what is more of the detail of the $48.8 million in the city's response. And so that's the sheet that you have behind it. Those are the kind of the buckets that we're monitoring, and then I just lumped them all into kind of the summary that you've seen before in the bottom. So that's that 48.8. I'm happy to answer any questions, but you all have that. And then we probably just need to touch on the resolution. So I don't want to skip over that if anybody does have questions. Okay, so you all have a draft. Thank you, Alex, for doing this.
Did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the health department, the equipment and technology, that's separate from what had already been asked for. Do we know what that is?
The, in their,
in the
line item, the 815, that is a lot of the computers that were needed and phones and different software for a lot of the contact tracing. So again, just kind of a reminder, the 48.8 is what is considered necessary for the public health response piece. And so those have been, in theory, approved. They've not all been expended by any means, but they've been approved. So that's, the departments are working towards that. If they've had additional requests that didn't seem to be that urgency and emergency response, they've been included in the different department requests, or also to note, they've been included under the supporting health and economic welfare of individuals. Edward?
Yeah, just really quick, I greatly appreciate what fire did in terms of boiling down their number and getting a lot tighter. One of the questions I had last time was about the health department. I've seen that there are a lot of layers here, and just trying to decipher if there's any overlap between that 19.4, anything else that's covered for the health department, and then also if they were asked to do the same type of exercise as fire. Clearly the health department will need more funds than most other departments, as they're kind of the boots on the ground and interacting, but I mean, their total amount is kind of the compiled amount of all the other departments. I'm just curious if there is any room for that to be trimmed down or at least prioritized very similar to what fire did.
I have not reached out to them to prioritize that, and those are mostly all capital in nature. So really looking at expanding Lens Health Center, improvements that are needed to Woodbine. So they, while likely would meet the criteria, they really don't address kind of the urgent emergency response. And so that's why those are in that bucket versus the other ones.
We're comfortable that there's not overlap between the different categories.
Correct. There's not overlap. Did that cover questions? Okay. So we have the first draft, and it's really just a first draft. What we did was we took the resolution from our assistance for rent, mortgage, utility assistance, and really tried to mirror it. So what you have are some of the highlighted areas that have changed or will need to be changed because they would not necessarily be consistent. And so, Alex, is there anything you specifically want to ask?
Some of this was originally kind of an internal discussion about some things I just didn't know about, and the first highlight was just I wanted to make sure someone confirm with me that Second Harvest has done CARES Act stuff before. Was that part of the discussion there?
They have. I reached out to Nancy, and they have received. Let's see. Actually, let me read her. They have been approved for CARES funding they've received TEFAP supplemental funds. I did ask for a little clarification, but familiar with that federal funding and some of the requirements.
I'll just leave that. We had that in there for United Way, and so to kind of justify why they would need to, and it looks like we can have the same language for Second Harvest, so I'm fine with that. And then I wasn't sure on section 2 of the language, I wasn't sure what the percentage was. I don't remember hearing that, so.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different. Let me read. I did reach out to Nancy, and I think I'm just going to actually share. It's not quite an apples to apples because it's not the same as distributing funds, and it's a really easy cut the check when you're giving away a combination of purchased food, donated food, food that's been rescued from our other restaurants. And so she said, the goal with the funding will be to provide more access and more food to those in need in Davidson County. Some of the items that may be included would be additional food, produce boxes, prepared meals, meal kits, home delivery, transportation for those without means to get to one of the partners, capacity building equipment for the partners' agencies, rented equipment, driver salaries for pounds delivered, fuel, expanding service routes, etc. They will be able to report back to the committee pounds of food distributed, meals distributed, distribution points, partnerships, and overall impact. So that would be a little bit when we got into the reporting and even like 1 and 2. Okay, so in section 2, there wouldn't really be a specific, you could do a up to, that type of thing. Down in the reporting for the, they won't be using Charity Tracker, and they won't necessarily be making direct payments. So those are just some of the things that we needed to make sure that you all were considering if there was any requirements that you wanted to ask, similar to the requirements that you that we asked of United Way. I could also just take what Nancy shared with us, that's the type of services that will be provided, and that's the reporting that will be provided, and I could put that into this resolution, and then we'll review a more final draft on what I suspect will be Monday.
Yes, if we need a motion, I think that would be a great idea.
Okay. So I'll use that verbiage. Does that work for everyone?
We obviously want the money to go to the extent that it can directly to the providing of food. And I know that does include transportation of the food, but the extent that that verbiage sort of includes, it makes it has a bit of just a general overhead component. I think we want it to be a little bit more direct.
We can narrow, that's why I read that specifically. Yep. If there were areas that you all wanted to narrow, I think this is the opportunity for us to get it in a draft, and then we'll do an official vote.
I would just maybe amend the motion to just say, again, I don't have the language in front of me, but just the direct delivery and transportation and costs associated with getting food to the residents of Davidson County. It's just really a point of clarification that it's just not going to Second Harvest, general operating.
And since we're not going to make a motion today, this is just kind of discussion. We'll incorporate all this. We'll do the formal motion Monday, so we don't need a motion today.
Perfect. Okay. Is there anything else that we've left off for today? Now, let's talk a little bit about next week, just to make sure. We got a lot of information from some of our small business partners. We had talked about potentially having some of the individuals that have reached out to us come to the next meeting. I don't know if you want to hear from individual organizations that have reached out. Do we want to hear from more than just those that have reached out? Because we will schedule and invite as you all request, or do we want another internal conversation about best and highest use of funds?
So you mentioned that we'll have a special meeting on Monday to approve the food security resolution.
I think that's probably the most efficient. If we're interested in having another late filing resolution for the council on Tuesday,
right.
There's a meeting Tuesday the 18th.
Right.
We would have to do that Monday. We would need the 48 hours from today until Monday.
Yes, I think that's a good plan, but also I'd like to make sure that we, before moving forward, follow up and take an action on the business relief as well. So I'm wondering, I'm not sure if we'll get information back from the agencies that were here today in the state, the information that we're requesting in order to make that decision. But at the next meeting on Thursday, will we have time to do that before moving into the departmental discussion?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think that was the plan. That's why I say absolutely. I think that was the will of the committee from the last discussion, was that this would be a two-part, and that we would really talk next week about, how to serve the small businesses.
The dollar amount around the Music Venue Alliance, and
I did today.
I'm sorry?
I just did today, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, that was sent to me this morning, and I forwarded it on, that we're talking about, yeah. So that was forwarded to me, and I forwarded it to Mary Jo. So they're asking for a little bit less than $1.5 million. They have a pretty robust way of figuring out how to come up with this number, and it supposedly takes care of these independent music venues through the end of the year. And so, Mary Jo, if you will forward that on to the committee so that they can read it. The challenge is is how to get those monies to them and who is going to be in charge of doing that. And they've proposed their own fund, which I think is not the way to go. We would just have to figure that if this is something that we're wanting to look at. I also talked with Audra. What's her last name?
Ladd.
Okay. And she's also sort of working to support these same types of businesses. One of the things that I asked her was, we really need to look at how these businesses are being defined. Because you can say independent music venue, but that doesn't necessarily include what we typically think of as independent music venues. And there's a lot of need out there. And so defining who's qualifying and what category they fit into and all that kind of stuff, I think needs to, because it's confusing to me, honestly. Like, how do you know, who's really qualifying for this? So the letter that Mary Jo will send to y'all is informative, and I think it's a good starting point. There's obviously a need there, and these are the businesses that make Nashville Nashville. Like, that's what makes Music City. So I really hope that we can find a way to support them, you know, but we've got a ways to go. And I think coordinating with all the different people, that's to Audra's point when she reached out, was that there's lots of people and lots of ideas and lots of funding sources that I think coordinating and having a cohesive path forward is super important. So anyway, she's going to send that letter to you guys.
I agree with Councilwoman Johnson. I don't think it needs to be a separate funding source. It could be included in the language that we use, but I do think it's important to have them at our meeting just to get some more information. So I don't know if how much time do we have?
We typically set 90 minutes. I don't think we've ever stopped right at 1:30.
Okay.
We're at 1:50 right now. You know, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time, so it is up to you all.
I was just going to say that, you know, we're running behind on getting all of this out. And so I think getting some of the key components that we know we're going to want to see in the resolution figured out sooner rather than later. For me personally, I think we all agreed that we need to prioritize women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. We need to prioritize those who hadn't received funding from the state. And then me personally, I would like to see in the resolution that those who were found to have violated healthcare orders, metro healthcare orders, would not qualify.
I do want to just clarify one thing, because I think you're right. But as far as getting the list of like PPP businesses, we will never get that, because if they got less than 150,000, nobody kept a record, so we will never have that. The other part, because Councilwoman Gamble, you had asked for this before for the list for the state. They cannot give us that either. So the most they can give us is the type of business. So that list that's public, so that's as most detail as we can get. I just want to make sure that you have that up front, so I'm not setting you up for failure or anything.
Yeah, maybe they could disclose that in the application process, whether they received funds from the state. Would that be helpful?
There's no way to verify it, and you're getting into really, like, did you tell the truth or did you not? You know what I mean? And
I think we could probably
but we can tell the type of
go
business.
with those who didn't
Exactly.
wouldn't have qualified, either weren't on this list or weren't eligible. If we kind of go that route, then maybe we don't have to know exactly who got it and who didn't.
Right.
Because we know those who don't qualify.
Yeah, because they'll work with us on the type of business. They just will never give us, this is the name of the business, I just didn't want to set false expectations.
And one question about the music venue, and I also got a copy of that letter, and I think there are about 14 music venue businesses listed in this alliance. I'm just, is it the will of the committee that we look at including them in this business relief as opposed to doing a separate, resolution just for the music industry? Include the music industry businesses in our business relief package or resolution? I think so.
Okay. All right.
Thing from today's meeting that should have been included, we've asked these folks to send something back to us about what they need and who they could serve. I just didn't know if the universe of who you asked was able to attend, or whether there's anybody that...
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Everybody that we asked to attend actually did, but it doesn't mean that... I think that's a good question, is that I don't know that it is the complete universe, and it's maybe something that we can work with those individuals that did come to say, who else is in this space? I wrote down a couple names that were mentioned that I was not personally familiar with, to make sure that we consider who else is doing similar work in the space, because it will help us from a capacity perspective, is my...
And also,
and communication. But I want to ask Mary Jo, the businesses or the agencies that were here do have some type of relationship with the city already, whether they're doing other type of grant work, program work. And so that's a benefit too, that the agencies that were here today actually also already have a relationship with the city. And so when we're looking, I mean, they've already gone through the procurement process and all of that. They're in the system. So when we're looking at trying to expedite this process, that's helpful, that we're dealing with
I believe
agencies.
it's true for all of them. I'll verify that.
I'd like to prioritize the businesses that have had to have been shut down the longest. I feel like, those are the worst hit. So we've got restaurants that have been hurt, but they've been able to open at some point, to some sort of capacity, but there are businesses that have been closed for months. So to me, I would rather prioritize on need versus female-owned, which I was, that's how I would like to prioritize it. I feel like I don't think that my business is any more important than Alex's business because he's not a minority. I just want to make sure that we're helping businesses stay open, regardless of who owns them.
I would say that I agree with Councilwoman Johnston in that we need to also prioritize businesses who have been closed this whole time. I do think it's important that we address minority and women-owned businesses. Since from the Equity Alliance report, we did find out that they haven't received the funding that other businesses had received as well. So I don't know if we could get more clarification on that, but I agree with Councilwoman Johnston that we do need to prioritize businesses who have been closed. So maybe it can be a scale.
Sure. I will just let you know, we should have some information from Equity Alliance, either in person or a report. I think, Ashley, is it confirmed? Are you attending the focus group? So Equity Alliance is having a small business focus group on Monday. Ashley is going to attend and either bring back that information, they will give us a report, but we will be hearing from some of the small businesses that they have, that responded to their surveys. What they did is they were getting a lot of write-in information and commentary, so they invited the group to come in, and we'll get some, again, information directly from the small businesses.
Go ahead.
One thing I want to say is, I guess I would caution the committee to be careful with respect to what we do for businesses. I mean, I'm very much still on the fence on how we should act. I understand that a grant program that the state did is not all that fulfilling at the end of the day and doesn't have the permanency, but I could see how they got there in that, it's easy to determine if someone, is facing eviction because they, lost their job, they can't work, they don't have income. Also easy to determine a food need, like we did with Second Harvest. It's more difficult to determine whether or not a business is successful or that it had to close based on the pandemic, as opposed to just poor management or something else. So I guess as we're kind of working through what to do here, if we're going to delegate this to other agencies to figure out, we need to be mindful and be careful to make sure that they are very strict in terms of getting down to the real reasons for that the business needs assistance. And if we're going to pursue another route, then I think we need to keep that in mind too. But as I know there's a desire to get the money out quickly, but I think we should balance. Got to be very careful with the reason for the business need.
I agree with that 100%. I think our application process for these dollars, whether it's a loan or a grant, needs to be very robust and require training, so that we're not just giving good money after bad, right? The other thing I just wanted to caution, I understand Council Lady Sepulveda's notion to not help businesses that were violating orders. I just want to be careful in that language because I'm confused with the orders, to be honest with you. Like, what are we supposed to do? What can we not do? Who can open? When can't we open? How does this work? And so if it's blatant and they've been cited and then they fixed it, or they didn't fix it, and they've had to go back and back and back, and they're like repeat offenders. That's one thing, but I don't think that's what you meant. But I do want, if we're gonna put something like that in the language, I want it to be very clear that we're talking about repeat offenders and blatant offenders that have been talked to by the health department or whatever, and they know, and then they still were doing things versus like, oh, sorry, I didn't understand that. We'll fix that right now, no problem, type thing.
Okay. And I agree with Councilwoman Johnson. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate my perspective that when I look at the list of people that have said they had needs, not just people, but enterprises, organizations, departments, we could easily just take them one by one and come up with a very compelling rationale why we want to give some money to them. But when I look at the spreadsheet, we don't have very much money. And I look at what the state has available for small businesses. The lowest amount that it gives is $2,500. For $1 million, we could do that for 400 businesses. We could just scratch the surface. So we could easily blow everything else that we have in this fund, not blow, but spend everything else we have in this fund on just one thing and never even take up the other things. I think we should really be cautious about that, even if it means taking a little bit more time to hear from more people and then trying to balance where are other resources available, where can only we provide the resources, and how do we balance that? Because I do think the numbers just don't look too great.
So one of the things we have to be really I forgot his name, the Pathways gentleman. I know from my business, getting a check for $2,500 is not going to do anything for me. So you can help 400 businesses by giving them $2,500, but you're really not solving that problem. So to his point of having a longer runway, I'm not interested in giving $2,500 to a bunch of people. I would rather really qualify these businesses that they don't have inherent problems with management or, whether it's how they're running their business, fiscal management, whatever, that they were truly affected by COVID. Everything was cool before COVID. COVID has completely messed them up. And what do they need from now until December 31st, right, in order to ensure or give them the best chance of coming out of this alive? It was said before, there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to fail, and there's no question about that, and we can't save everybody. But so how we spend this, and to me, it's not about how many can we, it's quality, not quantity, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And so to his point, the application process has to be super robust and require a lot of things, and it honestly needs to take a deep dive into their business to make sure that, yes, this is what caused this problem, was the closing because of COVID or the lack of whatever it is. It has, COVID related. So
you all may want to be thinking about application process and who. I don't know that we have.
Right. That was one of the reasons I asked the question of, okay, if this is our group, because I feel like they had a pretty good relationship with each other, which is great. What do they need in order to reach, communicate to, and service the number of businesses that we think need to be helped and can be helped? They're going to need probably more people. They're going to need, whatever. So
Can I put a pause? Ms. Vonda, what time do you have on Monday for a call on Monday for this special call just to do the vote on the food? Okay, thanks.
True. Probably earlier than our typical noon. Is morning okay?
Yeah, for me.
Y'all have been incredibly generous with your flexibility of your schedules. Any avoidance times? Anybody that says, I just can't do X?
I don't know how early is early, but if I get advance notices and if somebody can notify me by Friday, I can make arrangements over the weekend to move something.
Okay, we'll do that. No.
I'm not available at 11 or at 1, but I could do noon or I could do anywhere from 8 to...
I think we're going to shoot for earlier.
Yeah. anyway, I'll be interested to see what their proposal is coming back with what they think they need, and then if we can get that answer on, can it be a loan? Because I think that's more appropriate.
I'll get the guidance on that.
Yeah, that's going to be huge.
And also, I'd just like to reiterate, if we look at this from a three-prong approach, communication, direct services, so maybe for the direct services, we're supporting that with funding, but the business is not getting funding. They're getting support. They're getting e-commerce support. And then grants as the last piece for that.
Okay, so can we clarify who you want to hear from at the next meeting then? So the ones that we've heard from, yeah, the businesses. The ones we've heard from specifically, we had a request from our restaurant industry on routine testing with rapid results. We've had the Music Venue Alliance. Internally here, our Arts Commission has been hearing from all of the different arts and more arts organizations, arts and music. And so that would be Caroline Vincent. We've heard from the zoo. We've heard from the chamber.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the Alliance.
Arts.
Or the restaurants. You said the restaurants.
Restaurants. Zoo and chamber are the other ones who have submitted to.
The zoo, I think, challenged because, well, what? We can have them on for sure. They would love to.
Name 5.
Yes, the zoo, and then the chamber, and I think a lot of what we're talking about serving with small businesses is what they were looking at.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
Just for clarity, is the plan to have very similar to how we had today, where they're present, they're part of the conversation? Is that the goal, is to almost emulate how it was today?
That could be up to you. We could have them all. I think we need to be very precise. I think we need to set a time.
That was going to be.
And then probably, it's a public meeting, so they're welcome to stay.
No, I think. No offense to anyone that was here. I think all the information we got was valuable. I'm just thinking about us as a committee. We've naturally started to break because of the time. And while we gathered a lot of information, we weren't able to actually discuss and actually put forth anything. And I think that has been, I don't think it's been detrimental this time because we've already talked about meeting on Monday and setting up a time.
Correct.
But I feel like as we continue to have more information that continues to pour on top of the information we already have, before we actually discuss and kind of weed through that, it kind of just builds. So if we do structure it to where there's at least, even if it's just 30 minutes out of giving an hour to discussion.
I think there's 5. They can each have 6 minutes. That gets us to a 30-minute break, and it still gives us an hour of conversation.
Do you want some more? Hang on one second. Do you want some more time, like at the beginning of the next on Tuesday on Thursday, to actually discuss the information you got today with the small businesses as a committee?
Not necessarily. I just would not like to have 4 hours of time go by before we actually are able to talk about what I heard 2 weeks ago.
2-minute clock up
I
there,
think it's just it will build up, and we won't be able to make progress as well as we can.
Would it be more appropriate to ask them to formally write a proposal? Because I have a feel. I think that you can say you've got 2 minutes or 6 minutes or 10 minutes, but people tend to go off, and it's hard to rope them back in. And so a written proposal is more targeted. And I think at that point we can all, when we're bored at night or whatever, that's when we can read over these things to know exactly what they're asking for, how they've gotten to this number, or whatever it is. I think that's probably a better use of our time, because I want to stay away from the pitch of like, hey, this is why this group is, why we're so great and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather cut to the chase of like, look.
So we do have that now from everyone. I've already forwarded. I think the only one I need to go back to is arts organizations. So I'd ask, and I have some of that from our Arts Commission. But yesterday I received more detail from the restaurant industry. We got the number from you. You already have the case of support for the Music Venue Alliance, but
Yes.
we received the actual number today.
Yes.
I think you all received the email from the chamber, and I've included that. All of these have been in your previous packet. So but also, what I'll do is I'll do just those 5 in a fresh email, so it's at
Thank you.
your fingertips. Yes, I will. So that it's at your fingertips. And then I think we still want to hear from them, correct?
I don't, oh, sorry.
I think, yeah, I would agree. I think I prefer the structure of them giving us information beforehand. I would agree. Giving them an open floor to pitch may not be the best structure, but giving something beforehand, I honestly do like the idea of giving them a time limit. I feel like if we have what they present to us, give us a 2 to 3 minute overview, and then we can directly ask them questions.
Okay.
And then, or what we did today, which is probably what we probably should have done, is say, hey, I have these 3 questions. We don't need to spend time answering them today. Can you provide us more information? Because that's still absent from talk. And then move to the next person. I feel like that would at least expedite the process. Because I do believe there's value in them being able to respond to a question on the spot. I mean, there's only so much you can do from black and white.
Yeah, so lesser of time on explaining things, because we can obviously read, and I feel like we should come prepared, and then it should be like, hey, I'm, Courtney from the zoo. What questions, you've read my proposal, what questions do you have? And that's what they're here for, and so we can really get down to work instead of the fluff part of it. What I would like is for this business community that was here before, or at least some of them, to come back and really have a work session, because this is going to be complicated, on how we're choosing who we're going to get this money to, where is it go, all these things, what's required of people and all that, to really have those people that are in this space every day doing this to help us in a work session type thing instead of a question answer, but like, here's how they see this working the best, and taking that sort of input. So really a collaborative effort to help us, because I don't know everything. She doesn't know everything.
And just like we did with the United Way, I mean, they have an eligibility application process already. These agencies have that. So maybe it's hearing more of what they are already doing, and then maybe we add to it if necessary.
And we can ask for that information for you guys to have that ready for you. That's no problem at all.
All right. We have excellent. Thank you all again for your time.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.